And we are now live, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Welcome to Ely Council's Planning Committee on the 31st of March. This is an extra meeting held because at the meeting held on the 10th of March, there was an unexpected problem with the broadcast system. And the last 40 minutes, which included part of the debate and the vote, was not broadcast publicly on the council's YouTube stream. Measures have been taken to prevent a reoccurrence, but as a result, Planning Committee needs to meet again to consider the application as is now presented afresh. The officer will advise that the scheme was altered in respect of the details of affordable housing following the deferral of the application at a Planning Committee meeting held on the 17th of February. I'd like to just reiterate that this is a completely fresh meeting and not a continuation of either of the earlier meetings where the application was also considered. This means that members are not and should not feel bound by anything they said or done at those earlier meetings. I'm now going to just go through the standard issues and then I'll come back to this meeting. So can I take any apologies and substitute for absence? I don't see any. We have a full committee today. So there are no substitutions because it's the same committee that met on the 10th of March. There are no urgent matters. Are there any declarations?
There is one urgent matter, and that is to consider whether or not it is appropriate.
Yeah, I'll come back to that, Councillor Young, just in a second. I'll come back to that. I said I'd come back to that issue in a minute. I'm just going through the standard stuff first, and then I'll come back to you in a minute, okay? Matters, and no declarations of interest, I don't see any. And then matters to be considered in private, there are none. So this evening's planning meeting is asked to consider the proposal before them afresh. This item will be held in the normal way with an officer presentation followed by representations by members of the public, the applicant's representative and any ward members and the MP, Miss Rupa Haq. This in turn will be followed by a question and answer session with officers. If the debate then a debate amongst the planning committee members, which will be followed by a vote on the report recommendations. The minutes of the meeting on the 10th of March are just a record and the decision of that meeting can't stand. That decision is not material to the consideration of the application on this evening. So Councillor Young, you've got an issue you want to raise. Can I?
Yes, we don't usually hold controversial meetings like this during the pre-election period. We've got a council by-election coming up in Ealing Broadway Ward. This application is within Ealing Broadway Ward and the pre-election period has started. Never before in all my time on council have we ever disobeyed this convention.
Yeah, I have our Legal and Democratic Services Officer in charge, Helen Harris, who will reply back, please. Helen.
Thank you, Chair. Government guidance states that the local planning authority should take its decisions on planning applications as quickly as possible. At the time of scheduling the 10th of March additional planning committee meeting, following the deferral of the application on the 17th of February, it was appropriate and it remains appropriate for the application to be considered as soon as possible. On that occasion, it was still possible to convene a meeting before the pre-election period. However, following the problems at the 10th of March meeting, it was clear that the application was not to be considered if the application was not to be considered during the pre-election period, then it would be delayed until mid-May. This would have been a very long delay for such a large and important application. Because of the very unusual circumstances of this case, it was reasonable and appropriate that I consider the option that the application be determined during the pre-election period, despite my earlier stated preference for that not to happen. I took advice from external counsel before taking the decision to schedule this meeting for tonight.
I quite understand it is legal to go ahead. What I'm not happy about is whether it's appropriate to go ahead. We should be
Councillor
like
Young, that's
Caesar's
the
wife, but
judgment
beyond
you-
reproach.
So,
We've
Councillor-
never held a meeting like this before during the pre-election period. We shouldn't do it now. And I would like to propose a deferral until after the election.
So, Councillor Young, are you moving for a deferral?
I'm moving for a deferral till after the election.
Do I have a seconder?
You don't need a seconder, it's in committee.
Well, usual practice and normal practice has been to ask for a seconder over many years. So I would take some advice from our committee clerk around this issue.
We've
Yep.
got the,
Oh, Helen, sorry.
Yeah, Councillor Young is correct. You don't need a seconder in committee. You would need it if it was full council.
Okay, so, all right, maybe we've got it wrong over the years, but that's fine. So, are you wanting to move that deferral, Councillor Young?
yes, I am.
Okay, so as a result of that, I will have to take a vote, and it will be by roll call. So I will go through the members of the committee, and for the benefit of the members of the public, all the councillors are members of the committee except for Councillor Seema Kumar, who's a ward councillor, and she's speaking on the application. So she's not a member of the committee. So I will introduce other people as we move forward if this deferral is not carried forward. So we have Councillor Stephen Donnelly. How do you vote? Do you vote for deferral or against?
I vote against deferral, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Praveen Anand, how do you vote? Do you vote for or against?
I vote against deferral.
Thank you. Councillor John Ball, do you vote for or
I
against?
vote
For.
Sorry, I have preempted you.
Sorry, Councillor Ball, I didn't catch that. Can you confirm?
So, Chair, I vote for deferral.
Okay,
For deferral.
okay. Councillor Josh Blacker, do you vote for or against?
Against, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Paul Conlon, do you vote for or against?
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Tariq Mahmood, do you vote for or against?
I'm against, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Miriam Rice, do you vote for or against?
Against, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Nigel Sumner, do you vote for or against?
I vote for, Chair, for deferral.
Thank you. Councillor Lauren Wall, do you vote for or against?
Against, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Ray Wall, do you vote for or against?
Against, Chair.
Councillor Simon Woodruff, do you vote for or against?
Against.
Thank you. And Councillor Young, you defer,
For.
so you're for. And the chair is against. So it's carried 10, well, defeated 10-3. Is that right, Katie? Is that what you make it?
That's correct, Chair. Oh, sorry, Chair, did you hear me?
Yeah, I think you're very faint, Katie.
Okay, so yes, that's correct, Chair. So that's 10 against deferral and 3 for deferral.
Okay, you need to do something about the volume, Katie. It's very, very faint.
Okay.
Okay, but we've got that. So it's the motion for deferral is defeated 10-3. So we will move on. I will go through the process. I will call on the planning officer, first of all, to introduce the item, and then we will go through the objector, the applicant, and then the ward councillor, and then the MP to speak. So can I call on Greg Gray, who's the planning officer, who's presenting this report, and then we will move on to the other people. So Greg, do you want to switch on your camera and please take over and present?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm just getting the video camera started. Chair, I'm going to be assisted by a colleague of mine tonight who's going to operate the slides. So I will ask him to move through the slides, the intention of which is obviously to ensure a smooth follow through as possible. I'll be instructing him as we go. So as he's putting the first slide up, Chair, I'll just remind members that this is an application relating to Percival House, the demolition of existing buildings and phased redevelopment of the site to provide a mixed-use redevelopment comprising residential, office, civic and community uses, and flexible non-residential floor space, below-ground ancillary space for plant parking and cycle parking, replacement and relocation of the existing substation, associated enabling landscaping and public realm works, and provision of a new pedestrian and vehicle access. And Chair, can I also remind committee that this is a planning application that's being considered under Regulation 3 of the 1992 Town and Country Planning General Regulations, because the council is a joint applicant. In those circumstances, Chair, notwithstanding refer of the application but to the Mayor under stage 2, should you be minded to grant, the Secretary of State needs to be notified of the council's intention in this regard, and should be given the opportunity by law to consider whether he wishes to call this application in for his decision. So that's just a bit of background, Chair. Before the first slide, can I also reiterate, as you said, Chair, in opening, that other the changes that were introduced with regard to the affordable housing mix at committee on 17th February, there have been no changes to the scheme that is presented to committee this evening. The officer report has been updated, however, to reflect a number of matters, in particular the publication of the London plan in the interim, so that references to previous London plans have been removed from the text, albeit two evaded me, Chair, and then they're in the briefing note. That is also to incorporate any text errors or further representations that were received in respect to the previous consideration of the report, which is standard practice where applications are brought back to committee. And lastly, as explained in the briefing note, and with regard to the recommended indicative phasing of the application proposals and the decision of Cabinet on the 16th March 2021, phasing conditions that are included in the application recommendation before you have been tailored accordingly. But I would reiterate, for the benefit of the committee chair, that the details presented as this part of the application relating to indicative phasing remain exactly the same, that is to say unchanged from previous considerations of this application by committee. There are no changes to phasing, Chair. So, Sarah, if you put the first frame up, please. Sarah? Sarah, are you able to put the first frame up, please? Sorry, Chair.
Sorry, can you see nothing up?
I can see the first frame. Could you put the second frame up, please, Sarah? If you go to the bottom left-hand corner of the frame, you'll see page. If you enlarge it to full screen, that's it. Thank you. So we're obviously well acquainted with the building, Chair. So Percival House sits in the middle of this frame here, with Longfield House to one side and Town Hall to the other. Whilst Trevor's getting that up, and then Sever, if we could swiftly move to the next frame, please, which is thank you, which is a view from the north side of the site, Gordon Road and the railway line, and then flanking the site to the left of this photograph, Dickens Yard, and to the right, the end of Craven Avenue. Next frame, please. And then this is a street level view from Longfield Avenue, looking over the railway bridge towards the rear of the property, and you will see Percival to the right, and Dickens Yard to the left. Thank you, Trevor. Next one, please. And then a brief description of the characteristics of the site, showing the main treed character around the perimeter. And you'll be aware that there are trees included in the tree preservation order, the group in the tight blue adjacent to the boundary with Longfield House, And then other trees, mainly the street trees to Uxbridge Road and Longfield Avenue, they're street trees. That's to say they're in the control and management of the local authority. They are not included in a tree preservation order. Next frame, please. And then the context of Percival House, adjacent to the Ealing Centre conservation area to the east, and then adjacent conservation areas thereabouts in different colours. And there's some of the key landscape features in the general area, including Town Hall and the parish church of Christ the Saint to the Broadway and Pitshanger Manor. Thank you. Next one, please. And then these are views. The top photographs are views from Craven Avenue. Craven Avenue terminates abruptly at its end where it abuts the Percival House. They're very substantial, at least 4 metre high brick wall with properties flanking it either side. As you can see, there's no vehicle turning within the site. And then the two lower photographs are views looking into Longfield House from Uxbridge Road on the bottom left, and then within it looking back towards Uxbridge Road with Percival House to the left and the very substantial brick wall that runs along the boundary. And you can also see the line of protected trees in the centre of the photograph. Next one, please. And then these are photographs looking at properties, the rear of properties in Gordon Road from Longfield Avenue Bridge, the two top photographs. And then, as it were, turning about face and then looking back towards the centre with the blocks at Dickens Yard to one side, and in the bottom right-hand side, the flank of the old fire station and the pedestrian way currently situated adjacent to Dickens Yard there. Next, please. And then we have the development plan allocations applying to the site. First of all, the development site's development plan document identifies the car park and electricity substation for residential development. And then below that, the allocation in the Central Ealing Neighbourhood Plan, which allows for residential development in association with redevelopment of the civic offices with appropriate supporting facilities, including community uses. And I would just draw members' attention to the fact that although there is an overlap between the two sites in relation to the council car park, the neighbourhood plan allocation does not include the substation, but that's not significant to the determination of the application. Next, please, Sarah. And the applicants have, with officers, undertaken extensive consultation, both pre and post application submissions, including with Historic England, 2 design review panels, which were undertaken prior to the submission of the application with independent architectural and architectural historian consultants, wide public consultation by the applicant with the community at large, and that has continued post submission of the application as listed there. And then next frame, please. And this is some of the design development illustrations. First of all, in relation to the civic offices, it's development as part of the design considerations that took place through the DRP and as part of the application submission. And then moving on, please, Seva. Also design development in relation to the residential blocks, including these were in sections that did not involve the tower that now forms part of the application, which I'll come on to describe in a minute. Next, please. And then so we have the planning application scheme with the replacement civic offices on the Uxbridge Road frontage. And then you have to the north of that, flanking a substantial area of public open space. In fact, the total public open space within the scheme, Chair, is approaching 0.6 hectares, which is over more than an acre in old money, and a very substantial open space character. And then flanking that to the north and abutting the railway line, a terrace of mansion blocks, residential mansion blocks, culminated in the northeast corner with the 26-storey tower. Next, please, Sarah. So scheme phasing, Chair, and as I said at the beginning, phasing remains as it is in the current application. So the intention at the present time is, first of all, the demolition of the front part of the civic offices, followed by the erection of a replacement civic offices and the first 2 phases adjacent to Craven Avenue, followed by the next 2 phases between Longfield House and Dickens Yard, and then culminating in the completion of the development in the northeast corner. Next, please. And that's the landscape components within the scheme, noting tree works that are required, 2 trees flanking the civic offices building and other buildings fronting onto Longfield Avenue, and the new tree planting within the scheme, and also a scheme of that the applicants intend to provide by way of a collection of surface water in cisterns, which in 3 locations within the site, which will help to not only collect surface water but also feed existing and proposed trees in order to enhance their long-term retention. Next, please. And so these are the main components of the scheme, Chair. Civic offices with public library and community uses and office space contained in 1 unit, and then a residential development comprising 477 dwellings in a range of unit sizes, which I'll come on to shortly, and also in certain areas facing onto the public open space, employment and commercial uses. Next slide, please, Sarah. And this image gives you a comparative relationship of the proposed tall buildings within the site, including the tower, and the relationship with other buildings, tall buildings in the area locally, including the Arc Tower. Next, please. And then this is an image showing the rear of the site viewed aerially from the north, and you can see the relationship of the scheme to Dickens Yard and other building typologies in the area locally, including the relationship of the tower to those typologies. Next, please. And then some imagery of the proposed development, top right, looking from the west along Uxbridge Road of the new civic offices building, and then bottom left, looking from the east, the relationship of the new civic offices building with Town Hall in the foreground, and then the tower behind that, behind the tree in the foreground of that photograph. Next, please. And then some imagery of the proposed civic offices building, the combination of glazing and brickwork, patterned brickwork, and the use of green panelling to the end wall elevation, the grand window to which the DRP referred. And you'll notice also how the civic offices building is juxtaposed with a, as it were, sheared upper elevation, which stands on columns, forming an entry plaza to the new entrance. So the new entrances to the civic offices would be from Longfield Avenue, and then on the ground floor facing onto Broadway, there would be commercial entrances on ground floor, helping to merge with the street scene and assisting in placemaking. Next, please, Sarah. And then principal plans of the civic offices, the basement area, which will contain the plant and parking for the offices, and including the relocated electricity substation. And then the upper floors, there'd be community access entrance at the ground floor level, and then the upper first floor would contain the library and customer services. These are indicative. The overall areas are given, but the council will decide ultimately exactly how the areas are distributed internally, and then the upper floors in pink as office uses. And I take the opportunity here just to pick out the fact that within this building, as indeed throughout the scheme, the development is designed to conform to current fire regulations in terms of additional staircases. So you have 2 sets of staircases through the building from the upper floors to the ground floor, and also 2 sets of lifts, one of which is a fire access lift. And then there are also the internal features such as sprinkler systems, etc. Building intended to be entirely functional and meet modern construction standards. Clearly, that's a matter for building regulations, but I'd just like to remind members of that fact. And then cycle parking, obviously in the basement area with cycle lifts. That's fine, Seba. Please move on to the next one. cycle parking for the civic offices, and there will be cycle lifts to and from ground level of the civic offices, as well as a secondary access stairs in the southwest corner of the building adjacent to Longfield House. And then that image rather, also shows you the arrangements for parking in the basement area. So there is disability blue badge parking and 2 spaces for rapid response facilities for the council offices. Then there will also be cycle parking for the council offices and cycle parking for the residential component. And the residential component vehicular access, as well as the civic offices, would be from 2 car lifts, which is in the bottom right hand corner of that image. 2 car lifts from Longfield Avenue. They operate independently of each other. In other words, you can go up or go down from either of them, and they would serve as the principal means of vehicular access to the building for both the residential and for the civic offices and office use. Next frame, please. Then this image shows arrangements for servicing and parking. So there is off-street drop-off parking in Longfield Avenue. There is also loading and unloading at the rear of the civic offices. And then for the residential element on the northeast side of the site, there is access for servicing and delivery, including for refuse collection. And then in the northwest corner, adjacent to Craven Avenue, the truncated cul-de-sac will be extended into the site to provide a turning head so that refuse and delivery vehicles can enter and leave the site in a forward gear, which of course will ultimately be beneficial also for residents of Craven Avenue, since they won't have to have vehicles reversing up and down the road at the same time. I think it's important to emphasise also that this is the only point at which vehicles can actually penetrate the site at either end. The centre of the site will be entirely car-free, will be accessible only to cyclists and to pedestrians. And then I should just mention that there are on-street blue badge spaces on Longfield Avenue. They're indicated on the plan in blue on the, and that's the proposal at the present time. Thank you, Chair. Next frame, please. And then this gives you an idea of the flow of the spaces through the public sphere, in particular showing how the development will provide pedestrian, as I say, and cycle access from Craven Avenue through the site, both east-west onto Longfield Avenue or north-south into the town centre, and also how it link up through Dickens Yard. So effectively complete perambulation, both east-west and north-south, through the site, linking the wider residential hinterland through the site and improving permeability generally. And you can also see the variety of entrance points within the frontages, the emphasis on that being to activate those frontages and provide ready access to pedestrians and passers-by in a way that Dickens Yard doesn't currently do, because it effectively terminates at Longfield Avenue, whereas this will provide attraction, interest, and will help to assist in encouraging commercial and small business operators to come into the development. Next frame, please. And then this image shows the arrangements of aspects of the blocks in different colours. The headline point here is that there is 99% dual or triple aspect throughout the residential components of the scheme, irregardless of tenure. There are no single aspect north-facing units, and as you can see there on the breakdown, only 6 of them are south-facing, and in fact they're situated in the on the northwest side of the site. But I emphasise the fact that this is tenure blind in terms of this quality of accessibility in terms of aspect. Next frame, please. And then these are images of the floor plans of the units, and you'll see that there are central core accesses along the main blocks. And the advantage of that central core is that whilst it does not have natural light, on the other hand, it enables the adjacent flats to maximise their lighting. And I think this is a key design component, Chair, that needs to be taken on board in considering the merits of the proposals to achieve this very high standard of aspect consistent with the mansion block design. Then it has been necessary for corridors to achieve that approach. And that approach was supported by the GLA at stage 1, Chair. Next, please, Sarah. And then this is a breakdown of the accommodation within the scheme. It's self-explanatory. You can see the mix, and you can see the tenure. So we have private, we have London affordable rent, we have discount market rent, and these breakdowns of the units within the scheme are shown there. That comes to 50.5% by habitable room affordable housing within the scheme. And then the distribution of the tenures is shown in the lower table. If I just dwell on that for a minute. So the phasing is the indicative phasing that's comprised in the application that's currently before you. So phase 1 would bring forward blocks 1 and 2. Block 1 would have 28 private flats in it. Block 2 would have 67 London affordable rents within it. So they, in other words, they would come through early in the development phase. And then phase 2 building B5, which comprises 3 London affordable rent and 91.
Just 1 minute, Greg. Sorry to interrupt. I've
Yes,
just
Chair.
had a message where it's saying the screen is frozen. Could we just check, Katie, that
Yes, Chair.
whoever's monitoring it?
I
Yes,
will
Chair.
check, Chair, and we'll confirm. Bear with me a moment, please.
Yes.
No, all seems okay, Chair.
Okay, so I had Mr. Andrew Colvin just messaged me saying the screen was frozen and they couldn't be seen. But if everything's all right, I think we carry on. We move on. Greg, you've muted, Greg. You need to unmute. Fine.
Chair.
Okay.
So
apologies for interrupting, but can we carry on?
Yes, of course, Chair. So returning to the affordable and market dwelling mix page, and I was just explaining the units within each phase. So block B3 contains 65 discount market rent units. Block B4, 118 private units. I'm not, Chair, not according to my screen.
I can hear him clearly, Chair.
Yeah, we can hear him.
Yes, definitely.
It's working very clearly, smoothly. Chair.
Apologies, Greg. I just tried to see for myself, and it's a double. It's behind, so I've just switched it off again. But it is working fine.
No problem at all, Chair. So I think I've probably done that page to death now. If we can move on to the next one, please, Sarah. And then this table contains a comparison of the rental levels for the proposed 10 years. We can come back to it later. Dave Baptiste is with us tonight, Chair, and from Land Supply Team, and he'll be able to obviously answer members' questions on that. So this is put up now really as much for information as anything. If you want to discuss it in more detail, then we can later. Moving along. Seva, can you just check that your battery, it looks like it's running down. Are you plugged in the mains? Sorry, Chair, just want to make sure we don't lose the vital link. Right, so I'll move on. So this is the principal elevations, Chair. First of all, these are, as ever, the impossible planning elevations, Chair, but this is a view looking from, as it were, standing with your back to Dickens Yard on on Longfield Avenue with the railway line and buildings on Gordon Road to the right and Uxbridge Road to the left, showing the relationship of the civic offices, one of the mansion blocks and the tower block. Next frame, please, Seva. Oh, there we are. Thank you, Seva, for that confirmation. And so this view is an image from, as would be visible from the rear of properties in Craven Avenue. So looking there to the edge of the block flanking the nearest property in Craven Avenue, one of the mansion blocks, and then the civic offices to the right and with the tower behind. Next, please. And then a view from within the site itself. The smaller buildings on the left-hand side of that image are the end of the terrace of houses in Craven Avenue. So you can see how the development scales up towards the tower block B4 on the right-hand side of the image. Next, please, Sarah. And then this is an image facing the railway. So it's what you would see from the rear of properties in Gordon Road, with Longfield Avenue to the left-hand side of the image and the end of Craven Avenue to the right. Next, please. And you can see the stepping down, should I just point out the stepping down of blocks towards the housing on Craven Avenue on the right-hand side. Thank you, Seva. Next, please. And then this is some of the materiality of the tower block, noting the emphasis on natural and stone materials. We have white brick, we have red brick, we have this terracotta cladding, and then other materials that emphasise the natural feel of the scheme overall, and in channeling the mansion block theme or typology of the development. Next frame, please. And then likewise, the other blocks, and in this case, they would be finished in the same materials, also with pattern brickwork, but also with green terracotta feature panels within them. Next, please. And then some imagery of the public realm within the scheme, noting the new tree planting and the general treed character that will be emphasised within the development generally, and the high landscape quality of the main east-west passage through the northern part of the site. Next, please, Seva. And then information on the open space provision within the scheme. So in terms of private amenity space, which is as balconies, the scheme is compliant. And below that, there is a shortfall in communal amenity space within the scheme. But there is, in compensation, as I said to you before, 0.59 hectares of public plaza within the development overall. And then with regards to play space, child play space, there's a shortfall of 600 square metres for the 0 to 11 years. Play space for 12 plus years would be by way of contribution, as would allotment space and formal sports facilities. Move along, please, Seva. And then this is an image showing the play areas for the 0 to 4 and 4 to 10-year-old in different colours, and I think need to emphasise this is actually at a point, as you will see, about midpoint through the public space. This play equipment is publicly available, so it's not exclusive for the residents of the development. It's not fenced off. It will be available to any person passing through the site, irrespective of their relationship to the development. And next image, please. And then some images of the relationship with the new Civic Plaza materials underneath the entrance to the new Civic offices, and the relationship to the flank end wall elevation of the Victoria Hall opposite. Next, please. And then these three images relate to the points that of concern that Historic England raised in relation to the proposals and the three viewpoints they considered to be of most material impact are the ones that required most particular consideration. So the first image in the top left-hand corner is the setting of Christ the Saviour Church, and the words underlined at the end of that, judged to be a relatively low level of less than substantial harm. Those are the words of historic England. And then the image to the right, top right, is the setting of Ealing Town Centre Conservation Area, again using their words, judged to be a relatively low level of less than substantial harm. And then the view that was that exercised historic England, most particularly the view from Walpole Park and the listed bridge we can see just on the other side of the lake there, judged to be a high degree of less than substantial harm. That's assessed in the report, Chair. Next frame, please, Seva. And then these are wider views of the site in the general area. Wireline views in this particular case. So the first one is from St Leonard's Road, secondly from Gordon Road, thirdly from Haven Green, and fourthly from Turtle Green. And I know there have been concerns raised, Chair, with regard to the fact that most of the images seem to be carefully positioned so that there are trees in the way. And I take the point completely, but I think it's necessary also to bear in mind that, of course, trees are an important part of the character of the area more generally, so that there would always be some intervention of trees, even in views of the buildings. But the photographs have been taken at winter time so that you can get a proper appreciation of how the scale of development would be in those adjacent areas. Next frame, please, Sarah. And then with regard to separation distances from neighbours, and as you can see, design standards are met widely. The only one that's of critical mention is the block B6 to Longfield House, which is a minimum distance of 17 metres. In fact, it's more generally at least 18 and more, but you can see that minimum distances, for example, of B6 to Aspley House is 18 metres, and then more substantial distances to properties in Gordon Road over the railway line, and then the distance of 3 metres from block B1, where it's 3 stories adjacent to property in Craven Avenue. Next, please. And then with regard to sunlight and daylight impacts, the council had the applicant's daylight sunlight report assessed independently by consultants EB7. The images that you have here, though, are taken from the applicant's report. The buildings highlighted in pink are those considered to be the receptors most likely to be affected, the ones that were tested in detail. Ultimately, the conclusion was that those blocks properties most materially affected are Longfield House and Aspley House, and the conclusions were that the development would have a material impact on significant harm, constituting significant harm. I think it's important, Chair, to bear in mind the BRE guidance is guidance, and it's intended to be applied flexibly, and that with regard to harm, the essence of that harm is due to the fact that those blocks already enjoy a considerable amount of open daylight from the council car park, which is an unusual characteristic in urban locations. And also, Chair, important thing to bear in mind is the need to make a balanced judgment with context in terms of the allocation of this site for redevelopment and the need to balance harms versus benefits. Thank you, Seva. Next slide. So as of today, Chair, 2,230 neighbour representations, of which 2,218 are objections, 11 support and 1 neutral. I shan't list them, Chair, because they're in the report and members will have had the opportunity to see them for themselves. So we'll move on to the next slide, please, Seva. And then likewise, with regard to the public benefits of the development, Chair, and I shall not run through all of them here because they are set out in the report, but these are the public benefits that need to be set as part of the planning balance in relation to the harms of the scheme, and those harms, of course, in relation to the lesser substantial harm to heritage assets, the listed buildings in the conservation areas, the daylight sunlight impacts and other considerations that might exercise the council in coming to its planning decision. Next image, please, Sarah. So that's the briefing note. I won't run through it again, Chair, because I've already been through that for you. So next image, please, Sarah. And then the summary and conclusions, Chair, which I think are straightforward and are contained within the report. And I'm happy to answer questions on those later if you so wish. And that culminates the presentation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Could you take it down, Saver? Thank you very much. We have an objector. It's Save Ealing Centre. Andrew Colvin, are you going to be playing a presentation?
So,
Yep.
Chair, I will be displaying a video on behalf of Save Ealing Centre. We do have Andrew Colvin here, but he won't be speaking because the video will be played instead. Okay.
Okay. So can we go ahead?
Yep. If you bear with me just one moment, I'll get that set up. Thank you. Can you see that okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. I'll start.
Can you make it larger or not? Is that possible?
That's as big as it'll go.
Okay.
Okay.
The concept of tower development dates back to 2015. This particular development was started in 2017 as part of this policy. We now live in a different post-pandemic world. More than 50% of the flats are private. Savills' letter of 24th February draws attention to the success of Filmworks and strong interest from the overseas market. Who is this accommodation being built for? The concept of towers in Ealing is developed ad hoc on a site-by-site basis, contrary to, for example, Ealing's 2015 Community Involvement Policy and Policy D9 of the London Plan. There has been consistent and vocal opposition to these trophy tower developments. They cast an overbearing shadow. The Council in 2015 and the 2020 White Paper said they would consult residents in achieving a community you want to live in. Residents don't think they're getting planning that cherishes the past, adorns the present, or builds for the future, as the applicants would have you believe. Nearly 2,200 objections have been lodged. Case-by-case engagement with the public is not a substitute for required policy formulation. There has been consistent feedback that the tower block is too tall and overbearing. It would have a harmful impact on nearby listed buildings and conservation areas. In 2009, the Secretary of State turned down the 26-storey Arcadia tower block at Ealing Broadway, commenting on the harm to the Grade 2-star Christchurch. Why is this 26-storey tower different? It is even closer. The developers acknowledge the loss of sunlight and daylight for residents of Longfield and Apsley houses, some of whom are elderly and were persuaded by the council to live there. This will be significant for them. Their loss is swept aside in the balancing exercise. 10% of the flats are modified for wheelchairs. There are only 15 blue badge parking spaces, a shortfall of 33 spaces. Put yourself in the position of someone badly needing mobility. Even after tweaking, there is still a clear failure to provide family-sized accommodation for Ealing's poorest families, a need identified in your council's housing surveys. These families could not afford to live here. Worse still, the social and private housing elements are segregated from each other. You wouldn't dream of putting all the children on assisted school meals at a comprehensive school in one house and all the others in other houses, even if they wore the same uniform. But a borough that trumpets its equality policy is in danger of embedding this segregation. Ask yourselves why. There are clear grounds for objection to this application. It contains fatal flaws. This application does not cherish the past, does not adorn the present, and it certainly doesn't provide a future for Ealing's poorest families. The council continues to promote this development, notwithstanding these fatal flaws. Approval leaves you open to challenge.
Thank you, Katie. Okay, for the applicant, we have Sarah Parkinson. Sarah?
Yes, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yeah. So you have 3 minutes, madam.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. Vistry have worked with the council to address the members' previous concerns on the mix of homes within the affordable housing tenure. The uplift in affordable homes now results in significant improvements to the mix. particularly those homes available at London affordable rent, with 20% now being provided as 3 beds. The delivery of 50% affordable housing remains a key benefit. All of the affordable homes will be acquired by the council, with affordable tenures secured at levels that address local housing need, protected in perpetuity in line with London affordable rent levels. They will be available for families on Ealing's housing list. As the office's report states, the discounted market rent will also be capped at circa 66% of market rent, with a household income cap of £60,000, in line with the Mayor's requirement for intermediate housing. Both affordable tenures are considered as genuinely affordable housing under the Mayor's definition and will address existing varied local housing needs. Vistry's sales strategy remains one of a UK domestic market first, with a focus on providing homes to local people in Ealing through intensive local marketing. This ensures that local people from all walks of life can take advantage of the fantastic opportunity of having Ealing Broadway on their doorstep. The application proposals are a product of an extensive design process, conceived through working closely with Ealing Council's planning and design advisors, the GLA, statutory consultees including Historic England, and 2 sessions with the Ealing DRP. The development is tenure blind and the design quality is consistent across the entire site. The DRP's response was overwhelmingly positive, and it concluded, "What is being created in the Percival House scheme is a piece of townscape rather than just a development." The DRP continued to be hugely supportive of and enthusiastic about this project and the approach of the client and design teams. In terms of sustainability, the proposals remove the existing car park, prioritise recycling with a target of 97% of materials to be recycled or reused, promotes biodiversity through green interventions across the site, supports reduced car dependency and sustainable travel, and the proposal will see a reduction in 48% of operational carbon emissions, with the remaining carbon emissions offset by the Council's carbon fund to achieve net zero. Embodied carbon will be reduced over the life cycle of the building through the use of low carbon materials, recycled materials, and prefab elements. On fire safety, we do take this extremely seriously. We've been proactively working with MHCLG and the National Fire Chiefs Council on fire safety nationally and London to ensure that we maintain extremely high standards across the business. The Fire Brigade has raised no objection to the application, and the building regs application will be submitted to and determined by the building control team at the council during the detailed design stage to ensure full compliance with all aspects of fire safety. And finally, the coming months will see Ealing residents return to normal after a year of lockdown. While some things will change, the need for an affordable place to live, work, and shop will not. If anything, COVID has increased the desire for people to live, work, and shop locally, and this scheme responds to that desire to stay local and delivers all of that in the heart of Ealing Broadway. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have the local ward councillor, Councillor Seema Kumar. Seema, how do you want to do this? Because you've got a video you want to present, and do you want to speak as well? Is the video 5 minutes or is it less?
No, the video is just under 2 minutes, and I'm just going to do the introduction to the video and then speak.
Okay.
Okay, so I sent that through to Katie. So, I'm going to start now. I'm going to concentrate on what this development will mean for the people in my ward, the people I'm here to represent, who will live literally in the shadow of the development. Please listen to what my senior residents, who will experience a disastrous loss of daylight to their homes, have to say. So we play the clip now.
My name is Carol Wellstead. I'm a resident of Apsley House, which is social housing for the over 55s, located in Longfield Avenue, adjoining Dickens Yard. I'm strongly against the Percival House development because I believe it will have a negative impact on the residents of Apsley House. I lived in the tower block for 23 years, and I can tell you it was no fun for me or the people in the surrounding area. It was bleak. The lifts broke down, the stairwells were awash with urine. High rises are associated with crime and lack of community, and I can vouch for that. Most tower blocks are hated by their residents, and for good reason. People that live in tower blocks suffer more stress, mental health difficulties. Also, vandalism and antisocial behaviour is higher in tower blocks.
I was among the first set of tenants to move into Apsley in 2012. Yes, I expected things not to run smoothly for a while. But for 8 years, I had to endure endless drilling, banging, sawing, a series of endless noises and developments around us. Now further plans are in place for a 25-story block of flats to be erected where Percival Car Park is situated, blocking out every single bit of natural light and sunlight from our homes in Apsley House.
There were 70 people in this block. Most of us are over 65. Quite a few of us can't go out. We rely on the sun coming through our windows, which is why we have such large windows. And we're going to have no sun all of a sudden. What are we supposed to do? Sit in the dark all day? I know we're pensioners, but we're still citizens and we're still your constituents. We are the people that vote for you. And it's about time that instead of thinking of the mighty pound, you started thinking of your constituents.
Thank you, Katie. Seema, back to you.
I'll continue, yes. And talking about the wider implications of these plans and whether they adhere to adopted planning policies, for the record, I want it to be understood that, like the nearly 2,300 online objectors, I don't agree that they do. Confronted with 16 highly technical documents, the daylight impact study, impossible for ordinary people to understand and claiming to be objective, was obviously been written to support their case. It says that 35 properties are, in their words, relevant for assessment, but this includes 8 blocks of flats, a number of homes ranging from Vernon Court, a sheltered housing block, Longfield House and Apsley House, that will be totally overwhelmed by the scale of what's planned. Buried in the study is the admission homes here will experience a loss of daylight and sunlight in excess of the industry requirements. The authors claim this is acceptable due to Ealing's inner area location. This is wrong. It's an historic suburban town centre. The report, as it's required to do, doesn't consider how such a huge scheme will impact on Gordon Road, part of the Haven Green Conservation Area, which has been declared at risk by Historic England. This huge development will change forever the character of my ward, with its residential streets full of low-rise houses. It's pretty obvious to me that so many in my ward who have objected that a development of this scale will cause real harm. It's incredible to me that the local street system is not to be modified as a result of this development. The existing turning bans, strongly opposed by local residents into and out of Longfield Avenue, are to remain, so that all traffic to the site coming or going from the North Circular Road is forced to reach it through the residential streets. They run completely against the policies that the council has been proclaiming in its LTN program. Instead of keeping traffic out that shouldn't be on residential streets, it is actively encouraging them back into the streets. I also want to question the assumption in the scheme that car-free housing will generate less traffic. Rarely. A rear access and 2 stopover points are not anywhere near enough for such a huge scheme and a recipe for chaos. If I had the time, I would also criticize the inadequate provision for family housing here, the insufficient private outdoor space, and the fact that the council wants to demolish a building less than 40 years old with all the environmental damage it would cause. This seems very inconsistent for a council that positions itself as leading the fight against climate change. Also, pre-app discussions on major planning applications play a crucial role in shaping the way development proposals emerge. The refusal to place this into the public domain means the committee will not have considerations that have led the Percival House scheme to evolve the way it has. I therefore strongly recommend that the Planning Committee reject this application.
Thank you, Councillor Kumar. We now have Ealing Central and Acton MP Rupert Hunk. You have 5 minutes. You need to unmute.
This is the biggest application in Ealing for a century, the very civic heart of our borough, on public land up for mostly developer-led private gain, 50% affordable, only by habitable room and using discount market rent. Some boroughs, Southwark, don't even entertain any proposal with dodgy DMR. But if passed, by hitting the bare minimum mayoral public land requirement, it'll qualify for fast track with no more scrutiny. 477 new homes, but none at social rent. Shameful. No public consultation for over a year, but 2,300 and rising objections, huge local opposition. Revisions following the committee on the 17th Feb were deemed too minor to reconsult. Indeed, swapping a few party walls for what's still 5% 3-bed units and no bigger pays minimal lip service to the committee request for more family provision in light of the council's strategic housing market needs assessment. Still no place space. The statutory consultee pensioners of Apsley House, war veterans, face living on a building site and 78% of their light stolen by something twice as high as what they were told would be the tallest around. Ignored as they're seen as set to die soon anyway. Ditto Longfield House and Vernon Court, mere collateral. Worryingly, there won't be two means of escape, i.e. two staircases in residential blocks, despite it being best practice, union and Labour policy for tall buildings. Cutting corners here means sprinklers and unaffordable service charges. Cherry-picking 2016 London Plan bits on building up for housing targets is used to justify this maxing out of a relatively small piece of land to house the population of a small town. But this application should now conform to the 2021 plan, insisting on circular economy, construction, environmental impact, and design quality, all missing or circumvented. The imposing, this is no Gherkin or Christopher Wren of architectural beauty. The imposing street-facing prison-type blocks are bog-standard ugly. But guess what? The developer's own hand-picked DRP loved it. Ealing's official one, not been allowed anywhere near it. Dismissing statutory consultees applies to historic England. They see it as seriously harming Ealing's heritage. But their words less than substantial harm get twisted when they, an Ealing's own heritage consultant, want the most un-Ealing tall tower rethinking. You wouldn't plonk 26 floors next to Big Ben and Parliament, but this is the Ealing equivalent, forever obscuring the 1880s Town Hall, Christchurch, Pitzhanger Manor, and 7 other listed structures, all in a conservation area, which is what people like about the Queen of the Suburbs. The upcoming Environment Bill mandates biodiversity net gain, but decant and demolition all at once with massive carbon emissions plus destroying trees is net loss. And an indeterminate product like this does nothing for our poorest families most in need as build to rent. There's nothing for anyone trying to get on the ladder. But 251 of 477 units for private sale is great for Vistry shareholders, a company whose stated aim is to maximise margin while with cost-saving synergies. Committee members are custodians of Ealing's civic soul and municipal heritage. It's too important to gamble away for private gardeners' flats, shops and offices, all plummeting in demand and reaching oversupply in Ealing. With London depopulating and white-collar daily commuting, a thing of the past, 100,000 square feet of offices is excessive. Have we learnt nothing from Grenfell, the echoingly empty Dickens Yard, Brent's acres of unlet office space, now a Trojan horse for more luxury housing because it doesn't stack up, or Croydon, council went bust with an oversized town centre redevelopment. Committee members were courageous with Gurnell the other day. Arguments here are near identical. And last time, lots of members said it's not perfect, but they grudgingly accepted it. I say, why go for bog standard and hope for the best with the beating municipal heart of Ealing? Risk of appeal is low as council don't take themselves to court, but proposals can always be improved by taking a step back and not rushing decisions. This is our land, you, me, the citizens of Ealing, and our application. Yet a commercial developer who's already reneged on original plans for phase decant and 20 stories being the tallest is calling all the shots here, so we get a library a third of the size of the old one. If they won't tame this monster to an appropriate scale, listen to residents and reconsider those aspects blatantly at odds with planning policy. The Ealing plan is still legal till 2026. For the good of Ealing, the Queen of the Suburbs, councillors must vote this down.
I was muted. Okay, thank you very much for your contribution. Does the planning officer want to come back on any of the issues raised? Greg, do you want to come
Sorry,
back?
Chair, I can't get my camera to open, but I'm unmuted, Chair. No, thank you. I don't wish to comment on the comments made so far.
Okay, so we then move to questions. Mr. Colvin, you're not allowed to. I don't think I've already indicated I'm not going to take people unless I ask them. So you're the here now to view and not take part, Mr. Colvin. Do you understand? You're here to view. You're muted, but you're not to take part. Nobody can hear what you're saying. You are muted. Okay. Members of the committee, can you indicate? Okay, I've got Councillor Young and then Councillor Ball.
Whole list of questions, I'm afraid, Chair, but can I start off with cycle storage? Can I just ask for some enlargement on what arrangements have been made for cycle storage and whether that's up to current standards? I understand that the cycle storage in the council block is going to be accessed via a lift, and the stairs are quite tight, so that you wouldn't be practical to carry a bicycle down or up them.
Sorry, yes, Chair. Do you want to do them one at a time, Councillor Young? Because I'm obviously going to call. Yeah, okay, fine. So would you put the?
Okay. Okay,
well,
go ahead. Just do the count.
I can be a lot more helpful to Councillor Young with the drawing, Chair. I think.
Yeah, if we can have the drawings up, because we did see where they were.
Yeah, well, let me answer you, Councillor Young, while it's coming up, and it might be that. So the first point to make is that the quantum of cycle parking for the civic offices is below the council's policy expectation, but that was undertaken through consultation with TfL, and they considered that the quantum of cycle parking provided is satisfactory in the interests of obtaining access. But let's the next one on, please, Sever, if you would. Thank you. Is it possible to make this full screen, please, Sever? And then I think, is that clear enough for you, Councillor Young?
That's better.
Yeah. Okay. So, so the cycle parking for the council offices is indicated in red at the bottom of the smaller image here, and that is accessible both by lifts within that go from the ground floor of the civic offices. They are cycle lifts that go from the ground floor to the basement of the civic offices, and obviously come up in the foyer. So they're not exclusively for staff, they're also for persons coming by bicycle who want to park in them. Although there is, of course, extensive cycle parking around the scheme itself, within Longfield Avenue and within the perimeter of the development. And indeed, if you look to the bottom right-hand image, you can see some of the their little sort of 5 little lines. You could see there are banks of parking, cycle docks within them. The cycle staircase access in the bottom left-hand corner of the basement, Councillor, is a secondary means of access. It is not the principal means of access. But what it has within it is it has a ramp arrangement, so a bicycle can be led down through it into the basement area. But it is a secondary means of access. The primary means of access is through the cycle lift.
Does that meet the standards that normally apply?
That cycle access is not to a design standard, no, but because it's a secondary means of access, then it wasn't considered necessary for it to be absolutely compliant, because the cycle lifts are the primary means of access to and from, and they are high-speed lifts so that they are readily accessible. So that's your main point of access. It would only use that as a secondary.
Okay, thank you.
Have you got, how many more questions have you got, Councillor Young? Before
I've got loads. Let somebody else go now.
Okay, Councillor Ball.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, as this is the first time I've been on this application, I was.
And apologies, I thought it was. I did say the same committee, but I was referring to Labour members, and obviously I don't control who sits on from the opposition.
Absolutely, yes, that's right. So it's not quite the same committee. So yes, I welcome the words you said at the start about this being a completely fresh consideration rather than a rerun of the previous meetings. So the first question I've got, I'll just ask one question at this time, is about the consideration of the neighbourhood plan policies, because we helpfully quoted in the report on page 81 of 140. There's, I think it's paragraph 5.5.14 of the neighbourhood plan. Buildings abutting and close to houses in Craven Avenue should be kept to a scale in character with their 2 to 3 story height. Redevelopment elsewhere within the site should be of a height and scale that is not intrusive, dominant or overbearing when viewed from neighbouring residential buildings or from locations within and beyond the town centre. And then it goes on, the eastern cul-de-sac end of Craven Avenue should not be utilised to gain access to the site other than in accordance with Ealing Plan Site EAL 7, or if necessary to provide restricted service access to a relocated electricity substation. So, you know, it seems on the face of it that those are not being considered, but then a couple of pages on it says, in conclusion, the principle of the proposed uses on the application site accord with the development plan and with both development plan site allocations, AL7 and CNP2. Now, so I think what I'm asking really is for clarity on what specific, well, firstly on that sentence that does it, can it really be said to accord with that? But if not, if the justification elsewhere in the report essentially that the New London Plan overrides it, what are the specific New London Plan policies which mean that those objections within the neighbourhood plan to a scheme of this type are, you know, no longer valid planning considerations?
Sorry, Councillor Ball, I'm going to try and deal with this. Essentially, the position is that if one needs to go back to first principles, as it were, of the relationship of a neighbourhood plan to other plans within the thing called the development plan, which of course will comprise both the current publication London Plan as well as the extant Ealing Core Strategy and Development Plan documents, and the neighbourhood plan sits within that context. The role of neighbourhood plans, though, is not to go back and review the plans. So in terms of strategic allocations, how sites are suitable for development or not, it's not the purpose of a neighbourhood plan to override those provisions. In that context, the strategic guidance of the London Plan, because that's the most up-to-date plan, would take precedence. Does that help you with the, sort of the broad background to it?
I think the problem with that is that the neighbourhood plan is making specific points in detail about this site. So what you're saying is that the site is identified for development in a broad sense in the London Plan, but how does that override the specific comments about the height close to Craven Avenue and the servicing and so on that are specific site-specific policies in the neighbourhood plan?
But right, okay. So as far as the specific points of the neighbourhood plan are concerned, can we just look at the bits the components of the neighbourhood plan policy that you were talking about, and let's go through those, because there's quite a lot of them, and I want to be able to answer your question properly. Okay. So in terms of the relationship of the development, for example, to housing in Craven Avenue, as I indicated in the presentation, the blocks are scaled down, and in particular, block B1 is scaled down so that it is no more than 3 stories in relation to the nearest property in Craven Avenue in order to achieve that relationship to adjacent properties. That's the first point. Does that help you with that?
Well, it does, but then the next bit goes on to say, and on the rest of the site.
Sorry, Councillor Young, you just muted yourself. Oh, Councillor Ball, sorry. You just muted yourself.
Sorry. Yeah, well, it does, but then it immediately goes on to say redevelopment elsewhere within the site should be of a height and scale that is not intrusive, dominant or overbearing when viewed from neighbouring residential buildings or from locations within and beyond the town centre. So that's the next sentence is a much more general point.
Yes, it is, Councillor Ball, and dare I say it's a general planning consideration. Is one for a matter of judgment, and it's for the planning committee to make a judgment as to whether they consider the development is compliant with that. The recommendation of your offices is that it is, because it corresponds to the typologies that are existing locally. There is a separate conversation with regard to the relationship of the tower in policy terms, but that policy does not include the principle of a tower, because it wouldn't go to general principles of the need to optimise development potential, which is what I was saying to you about the neighbourhood plan, not, as it were, overruling the wider strategic objectives of the London plan.
Okay, Councillor Ball, is that done enough?
Well, and then the final bit, it was about servicing from the end of Craven Avenue that the neighbourhood plan said shouldn't happen, and is happening.
Sorry, you're breaking up.
Sorry, we're not able to hear me. Yeah, so the final bit of this was the servicing from the eastern end of Craven Avenue, which was specifically said shouldn't happen within the neighbourhood plan, but is happening in this proposal.
Well, it is an objective of the. It says vehicular access shall be from that. Well, that's actually an objective of the ENP2. That servicing access. It's the intention of it is that vehicle servicing access should be from a Longfield Avenue, but it should not be utilised to gain access to the site other than in accordance with EL7. i.e. by pedestrians or cyclists, or if necessary to provide restricted service access to a relocated substation. I see what you mean. So what you're saying is that that doesn't permit its use for example, refuse collection or delivery access. I understand that, and on the face of it, that's correct. But on the other side of the coin, what the development does do is it provides for a turning head within the scheme in order to allow service vehicles to enter and leave the site from that corner. That's point one. And point two, whatever development occurs on the application site, because of carry distances for refuse collection, for example, it would not be possible to service, even on that basic level, the whole of the development from Longfield Avenue. There would always have to be some sort of refuse collection facility if that part of the site was not to be sterilised.
Okay, thank you. I have Councillor Simon Woodruff. He's raised his hand. So, Simon.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I think all along it has been slightly confusing because it's obviously we tend to think of the developer and the fact that the developer is the council. I think we need to keep thinking of it as a developer and not so much as our council. My question is, I mean, we had this debate towards the end of the last meeting, but this is a fresh meeting, so we need to absolute clarifications. So 3 of the blocks are private, and that's including the tall one. And then 3 of the blocks are for various types of affordable housing, and they are separate. So I think we've often, in many applications from developers, we've kind of argued against that system that you should have some separate them. Is that still the situation? There's no movement on that. We've got 3 private blocks and 3 affordable, and they're separate buildings and separate entrances.
I think the short answer to the question, Councillor Woodruff, if I'm interpreting you correctly, is that the arrangement of the tenure mix has not changed through this application from when it was submitted or when it was considered by the committee previously. Does that help you?
Was that a yes then? Was it?
It's not changed. Yes, if that's the answer, yes.
Okay. Councillor Young, have you still got your hand up for something else?
Yes, I have.
Okay.
My next question is to do with the play space. Could we go back to the slide which showed the lack of play space, and can we explain what's being done to try to remediate that?
Yes, Sarah, could you put the slide up, please? think it's about halfway through.
Oh, no, go back one.
No, yeah, it might be one back. Yeah, go back one, please.
That's the one. Oops.
No, no, there it is. Yes, Councillor.
There's a substantial shortfall there in communal amenity space and play space for various ages of children. What contributions are being proposed to offset that?
Well, financial contributions are proposed in accordance with the council's normal practice, and they will go, as I've put in the footnote there. They would go to the council to provide for improvements to play space and public open space elsewhere in the area.
But how much are we talking about?
The financial contributions?
Yes.
They are.
They're listed in the report, Councillor Young. I thought you would have gone through them.
Yes, I'm just turning up. It's on page 5 of the report. Financial obligations. No, it's not on this, Sever.
The actual report.
But the point I'm trying to make is that the financial contribution isn't going to be enough to purchase 2,859 square metres of community amenity space anywhere within Ealing Broadway.
No, Councillor, that's not the way that the financial contributions are directed. They are normally paid to the local authority to help enhance and improve the availability of existing space within the area.
I understand. I've pointed out before that all you can do is buy gold-plated grass with it. It doesn't get you very far. We've already used the open spaces of Walpole Park and Haven Green more than once in supporting developments without adequate amenity space. Putting another one into the mix is just going to make it even more difficult to find a space to sit down in these parks on a hot sunny day like yesterday.
Fine. Councillor Young, you've made your point. It's in the report that there is a lack and that there is mitigation. So I'm going to move on. Councillor Anand?
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, as this is a fresh report, I'd like to know, as there was a deferral of the first meeting, I'd like to know how the 21 extra 3-bedroom flats were calculated, and why 21 and why not 19 or 25? How was that calculated? And secondly, for this project to be viable, I understand that there's been a viability or an assessment done to assess how many affordable houses we can have. And we don't, what was the valuation of the land of the car park when that assessment was done? And finally, well, I'll leave it there. I've got more stuff to ask later on, but those two questions, please.
Taking the first one, Chair, in response to the deferral of the application previously at committee, the instruction of committee was for the developer to explore the opportunity to increase the provision of 3-bed units within the scheme, which the developer did. The committee did not set any limit, maximum or minimum otherwise, and the developer therefore responded to that request and was able to deliver 21 additional 3-bed units within the scheme as a consequence, and that's how that number was derived at by looking again at the scheme and looking at the scope within the scheme to accommodate extra space. On the second point, Chair, as this development is 50% affordable housing on public land, then it would qualify for the GLA fast track process, in which case there is no need for a viability assessment to be undertaken.
Yeah, that's very clear. And
sorry, Chair, but I still asked the question about what valuation was given to the land.
Well,
that's not I can't answer that question, Chair, I'm afraid.
That's not an issue for planning committee.
It is, because if we're assessing a development which is 26-story tower, and we are told that this is because it's actually paying for the affordable housing, then it is a valid point.
Councillor, and as the officer just indicated, that because they're offering 50% of genuinely affordable homes, then there is no need for a viability assessment. So there would be no valuation in that way placed.
Are we putting a zero value to it?
No, we're not. Sorry, Councillor Anand, you're misunderstanding. There is no need for a viability assessment because they meet the requirement of the mayor in offering 50% affordable homes on that site. So there is no viability assessment carried out because they are meeting that requirement. So that's where we are. Okay, what I want to do actually is, the number of people are asking questions, but I want to bring in our housing supply officer, Dave Baptiste, because I think it's very important. I've had a number of emails, etc., around this issue of it not being genuinely affordable homes, and they're not really the kind of homes people want to live in. Could we just cover that area off once and for all in terms of who can afford to live in them, how we're working, what proportion of from the waiting list would be going in, how would we nominate them, and just a pure overview of the affordable housing offer that's been made on the scheme. David, housing supply officer, yeah, is that right?
Head of housing development.
Yeah, sorry, apologies. I always get yours wrong.
If you could put that, there we are. No, the next one, please, Seva. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you, Greg, Seva. Just to introduce myself, I'm Dave Baptiste, Head of Housing Development, and part of my responsibility is to discuss and negotiate and to support the delivery of as much affordable housing across the borough, across all developments as possible. In this case, I think the chair is indicating there's some concern over affordable housing and effectively what it stands for. So this development has already been indicated by Greg Gray, meets the minimum policy compliant position for the mayor, and supports the borough's position to deliver affordable housing. It's not a perfect world, so this is in my view a good scheme to have delivered more affordable, some of which are 3-bed housing. Down to the question of affordable housing and who it's for, essentially the council has a statutory responsibility to address housing need in certain categories in terms of the most vulnerable people that are presented to the council. And it does that in an environment where it's not perfect competition. There is certainly more demand than there is supply. So it's a given that we need as much affordable housing as we can. And what we do to try and shape the, if you like, the quality of that offer is to understand from a policy position and an evidence position what affordable housing we need in the borough. And that's where that word strategic housing market assessment has come in. So we need across the piece, this is not scheme by scheme, but we need something in the order of slightly over 60% of 1 and 2 beds, because that's the makeup of the households that are coming forward and we've assessed the need for. And the remainder being 3-bed plus. It's rare to see very large accommodations, so that tends to be 3s and 4 beds. In addressing the point about affordable housing, up on the screen, there's an indication of the rent levels that are part of this scheme. This is quite an interchangeable term, so London affordable rent is in old money social rent. It's difficult to address what people mean by social rent because that's often quite individual, but I think I get it, and it's what council housing used to look like and the rent levels. We have to work with what we've got going forward. So London affordable rent in this vein is interchangeable with social rent, and the next round of GLA funding will reintroduce the term social rent, as the government has. I think the main point to understand here is that is addressed to people who can't afford to purchase on the open market. That also applies for the intermediate rent here, which is comparable to, I don't want to get too techie, but it's comparable to what has been used, the term of London living rent. The sum total of all of this is that these rent levels are considerably sub-market, considerably lower than the market. You wouldn't be able to rent this kind of accommodation brand new anywhere else. So they are targeted at people who earn no more than £60,000. And I think another misnomer is that all people who come forward for affordable housing or social housing are all on housing benefit. That's not the case. There's a mixture of people who are working and people who are not working. But the upshot of that is that it's addressed to people who need it the most. I think I might end it there for now, Chair.
Okay, thank you. I have Councillor Rice and then Councillor Mahmood.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to ask about the blue badge spaces, because I'm just wondering if we can clarify, please, what would be the normal requirement for a development of this size in terms of the number of spaces, because I'm just a bit concerned to ensure that that everybody who lives there gets the opportunity to live a full life. And I'm sure there'll be a number of people who would need the blue badge spaces in order to travel around, please. Thank you.
Greg, can I take Councillor Mahmood as well, and then you do too, because
of course, Chair. Of course.
Councillor Mahmood.
Thank you, Chair. Just want to do the quick clarification. What sort of formula we applied here in terms of density? Just wanted to know how many dwelling per hectare.
Okay, thank you.
So for Councillor Rice, Councillor, the provision of parking within the scheme is directed to us by TfL as the operative highway authority in this case. And TfL's requirement is that in highly sustainable locations such as this, we should not seek to provide more than 3% parking, and that parking should be exclusively blue badge parking. So that corresponds to their requirement. So the number of spaces meets with TfL's requirement, and they have accepted that in this case.
Thank you.
And then, sorry, Councillor Rice, do you want to come back or?
No, I just wanted to thank you, Greg, for
sorry. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you.
No, that's fine. Thank you, Councillor. With regard to Councillor Mahmood's question, of course, Councillor, the point to bear in mind now is that I'll give you the factual information, but we should bear in mind that following the publication of the London Plan, density no longer forms part of the analysis of different proposals because there are other drivers, particularly with regard to site optimisation. But if I direct you to page 15 of the report, it says that the residential development density of this development is 476 dwellings per hectare, or 1,335 habitable rooms per hectare, equivalent to a site coverage of 40%.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ball, are your hand up for another question?
Yes, that's right, Chair. Yeah, it was relating to what Dave Baptiste was saying, actually. I mean, he was kind of equating LAR is social rent in old money. I mean, am I right in understanding that some boroughs have put forward bids in the current GLA funding round for social housing? So it is separate. It is identified as a separate product. And am I right that Ealing hasn't done that, but some other boroughs have put forward bids that are wholly or partially social rent?
Do you mind if I let Dave Baptiste answer that question, please, Councillor Ball?
David?
Yep. Thank you, Chair. I think, if I've got this right, what you're referring to is the next bidding round of the GLA, where they've reintroduced the term social rent, and the bidding deadline for that ends on April the 9th. The council is intending to put a bid forward, and social rent is the main category that it will be bidding under.
Okay. Councillor Young, your hand's gone up back up again. Another question?
Yes, indeed, Chair. Can we turn to the loss of light in Apsley House and the residents within? Looking at the report, it seems that there's a major impact on 126 windows. Is that correct?
That's what the report says, yes.
And it talks about noticeable transgressions. What is meant by that?
They're talking about transgressions of the building research establishment's guidelines for measuring lighting impacts on developments. The operative word here.
Breach those rules.
Guidelines. Sorry, Councillor, I cut across you.
It does breach those rules.
It breaches those guidelines, and it's important to bear in mind that they are guidelines, and they are not mandatory. They're not policy. And they are to be used as guidance, not as a way of judging the acceptability or unacceptability of development.
It also goes on to say that 81 properties retain less than 15% VSC. What does that mean?
That the vertical sky component, which is VSC, essentially it is a view of the sky from the plane of a window. And that needs to be looked in context again with regard to exactly how those windows currently receive their light, because it's important to note, particularly with regard to Aspley House, that a considerable number of the windows to that block, particularly those facing Longfield Avenue, are actually recessed behind balconies. So their lighting is already compromised by the design of those blocks.
But it will have a major impact on the lives of the people living there.
It will have an impact. The question is whether it's major is a matter of judgment. I repeat, it's guidance and is a matter of judgment for the authority at the end of the day as to whether that is so significant as to necessitate a refusal of the application, taking into account all other material considerations.
45 out of 120 meet the NSL?
That's the near sky limit. That's right.
Near sky limit?
Yes.
What is that?
Sorry, not near, no sky limit. That is essentially properties that if you were to stand at the window, you would be able to look directly up above you, as it were, straight up into the air.
So a third, more than a third, would not be able to do that.
Well, it depends. Yes, but that obviously depends, and I don't have this in front of me, but that depends on which windows you're talking about, because that includes, for example, things like bedroom windows or bathroom windows, which don't necessarily require that level of natural lighting.
Well, these, I think, we're referring to properties rather than just individual windows.
They refer to properties,
and those,
yes.
so they will almost
it would include within them things like
fronted.
bedroom. Yes, indeed, and they would include within them things like bathroom windows and bedroom windows.
Okay.
They'd all be affected, yes.
Yeah, all right.
would be
You
an
make your
effect,
point,
yeah.
Councillor Young. Councillor Anand, you raised your hand again. Councillor Anand?
Yes, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Yeah, this is just a quick point on the additional point that was given on disabled parking in the last meeting. I know so can we just get clarification that we're going to have the informative order as per page 14 of page 192, point 5.
Which is?
Sorry, you're talking about that page of the report, are you, Councillor?
Yes. So can we just
let
have
me just
confirmation
turn it up,
that should this application be successful tonight, that point is actually added on, which was discussed, the additional blue badge parking on Drive Avenue, sorry. So I'll read from the minutes.
Yes.
The additional of an informative in order to secure blue badge parking in Longfield Avenue for visitors of the council offices and to be implemented in conjunction with the parking development and the chair.
Okay, we can put that on. Yes. I think, Greg,
yes,
we agreed.
yes,
I think
Chair,
you can put that on. That's
certainly
fine.
can, Chair. Certainly can, Chair.
Okay. Councillor Young, I'll come back to you one more time, but I do need to move to the debate.
We've still got questions that need answering.
Yes, I
These
know.
are all new questions over and above what we asked at the last meetings, plural.
Okay,
But
go
I'm
ahead.
very reasonable to ask them. This is a badly designed development. There are so many aspects that need to be questioned.
Well, go ahead.
Thank you. Family accommodation, which we've seen and put into this development now. At
So,
what height,
sorry,
what floor level are we talking about?
Sorry, I missed the beginning.
Three-bedroom properties that that have been included in this development now. At what height would they be? What floor level?
I'm sorry, which question are you asking?
I think Councillor Young's
Three-bedroom family
asking.
accommodation.
I'll answer, Councillor, if I can, but I think you were asking how many three-bedroom properties there are in the development.
No, the three-bedroom properties that we're talking about. At
Yes.
what floor level will they be situated?
They will be situated in those floor levels. I think they are, if I'm not mistaken, we added flats, three-bedroom flats, but they were in the first 7 floors of one of the blocks. You just bear with me a second, please, Chair. Three-bedroom flats, discount market rent. So they are situated in right.
Can I suggest?
Okay, they are situated in block. I need to check this. I think they are situated in block 2 and in block 3. I'll just have to check the numbers here, and then I need to go back over the plans. I can look at it on the phasing plan.
Councillor Young, what point are you trying to make?
Well, it's family accommodation. So if it's up at the top, it's not much use.
Okay, I thought
that was your question, Councillor. I can tell you that they would be situated on the north side of the site.
So, but what height, Greg? He's wondering, is it on 5th floor, 6th floor, or is it a mixture?
No, Chair, they are situated, if I'm not mistaken, in the first 7 floors of those 2 blocks.
Okay, so you've got it. They're in.
Well, there's a difference between the first floor and the 7th floor.
The first 7 stories.
There's a difference with family accommodation if they're in the first floor and the 7th floor.
Well, that's a judgment you need to make, Councillor Young, as part of this application. But they're.
Sorry, no, Chair. For the avoidance of doubt, Chair, they are situated on floors 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Okay.
Not for 1 and 7. Numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. They're on those floors.
All right. So you've got your answer, Councillor Young.
Thank you.
Have you got another question?
Yes, I wanted to know how much further forward on Uxbridge Road the new development would be than Longfield House next door, which I believe is the furthest south of the buildings on that stretch of road.
Yes, I'm just having a look, Chair. I'm going to have to take a measurement if you'll just give me a second, please, Councillor Young.
Okay. Do we have anybody else who wants to ask a question? Please indicate. Okay, so we will, all right. Councillor Ball. Okay, I'll come back to you in a minute.
I would estimate 3 to 3.5 metres, Chair. Sorry, I can't give a more accurate measurement because I don't have scalable plans, but they would be 3 to 3.5 metres further forward.
It's a long way further forward than any other building on that stretch then.
It is the furthest most block currently.
Okay, so you've had your answer, Councillor Ball.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask on the point about tall buildings. Is the new London Plan policy D9 on tall buildings? It's supposed to identify specific areas for tall buildings to be built in. So what are officers relying on in terms of this site being allocated for tall buildings, given that the points you were making earlier about the neighbourhood plan sort of specifically say it's not suitable for tall buildings?
Well, well, first and foremost, Chair, I think I need to make the point clear that, of course, this application has passed through stage 1 referral to the GLA, and they assess the development that's before you in the context of policy D9 as it was at that time, which has changed little other than in relation to certain detailed characteristics in the publication plan. And so the GLA assessed the proposals as a tall building in the context of policy D9 as it stood, and they considered it to be compliant. I think that's a point to bear in mind, so that from a strategic point of view, the strategic authority considers it to be within the general auspices of that policy requirement. The second point, though, coming down to the situation more specifically, is that D9 talks about locations that we employ from our point of view as sites that would be within the broad context of the development strategy of the core strategy of the plan, and those locations are those where we would seek to achieve higher buildings than occur locally. Acton, Ealing, Southall town centres are 3 locations where that would be the case. So in essence, the position with regard to tall buildings is its consistency with strategic policy rather than necessarily its consistency with local policy. So there is no presumption, for example, that tall buildings can only occur on a site where it has been expressly allocated as a tall building. I'm happy to, only for the purposes of the fact that he's a policy planner and I'm not, Chair, let my colleague Steve Barton intervene. I know that sounds a bit limp, but I have to, when it comes to nuances of policy, Chair, thank you, Councillor Ball, for laughing. I'm grateful for that. If Steve wants to add anything to it, Chair. But I mean, I'm sorry, Councillor Ball, I don't want to obfuscate. It just seems to me that perhaps maybe it might be better for me to hand it over to a man who knows what he's talking about in this case.
Mr. Barton?
Yeah, happy to help out. I mean, Councillor Ball makes a good point because he raises D9, the new draft policy in the new revised London plan. And he rightly refers to the fact that London Plan refers to locations, as the officer has explained, but nowhere in the London Plan does it define what locations actually means. It's not actually set out as a definition, but it is a phrase that's used repeatedly throughout the London Plan. So, for example, by way of analogy, a strategic industrial location is clearly obviously a location, not a specific site. A town centre location clearly is not a specific site, it is a broader location. And similarly, a site which which is accessible to public transport is obviously referring to more than an individual site. So So those locations are not defined within the London Plan, but within our own local plan, policy 1.2H, it says Acton, Ealing and Southall town centres, together with gateways to Park Royal and identified development sites, are considered suitable and appropriate for tall buildings in certain circumstances. So there is no there's no confusion in terms of the interpretation of the London plan in this regard.
Thank you for that. Councillor Young, your hand is still up. Have you got another question?
I've got another question, Chair.
Okay, come on.
Can I ask how the change in plans for demolition have affected the environmental management plan, the traffic management plan, and the number of lorries visiting the site?
Sorry, are you referring to the cabinet decision, Councillor Young, or to the application that's before us?
Well, you've got a change in the briefing note, so it's before us.
I see. Well, the reason for the changes to those policies, Councillor, is because, those conditions, Councillor, was because as originally drafted, they contemplated the indicative phasing that the applicant had put before the council at that time and made specific references to that phasing. In light of the cabinet decision and the flexibility that would bring forward, it would be inappropriate to pursue conditions that may, and I emphasise the word may because we do not know what those changes may or may not be, may change the phasing. And if they do, then they may have implications for construction management plans and other similar conditions. So the council needs to have the ability to be able to review those, for example, construction management plans in the light of any changes to the phasing of the development. So they would have to be looked at together. So it would be wrong to have a condition that says you keep to one type of phasing and then allow the applicants, if the council was so minded, to change that phasing, and then the two would be out of step with each other.
Does it remain the case that no traffic will be allowed to come over the railway bridge?
Traffic would be permitted to come over the railway bridge in the current plan unless it was the view of the council that it should not, in which case a clear indication would be given to that effect to the applicant.
When we built Dickens Yard, we did put a condition in that traffic should not use the railway bridge and come from the residential areas in the north. Why have we not got that in this plan?
Because the construction management plan that we have put forward to us at the present time does not contemplate necessity for it, because the vast majority of traffic would come from Uxbridge Road. But if it was the view of the committee that no traffic should arrive or leave from the north, then that can be made a condition of permission.
It can be made a condition. Thank you.
Yes, indeed, sir.
Thank you. You've exhausted my list of questions.
Okay. So you're not suggesting that as a condition, though, are you, Councillor Young?
Yes, most definitely.
My view, Councillor Young, is that we may get a different application coming in after this in terms of the construction management plan. So the conditions are there to manage that. And I would be much happier if it was put into the hands of the chair in consultation with officers if they wanted to change the construction management plan and how
I don't mind if it's an informative rather than a condition. But
we can have an informative, but
Dickens Yard. I don't think we have a protect my residents north of the bridge.
I understand what you're saying, and I'm happy to have an informative, and maybe the officers will consult with the chair if and when there is a separate application to manage the construction management plan. Is that okay with the committee?
Yes. I'm happy to second Councillor Young. I'll take it again.
Well, Councillor Young is not suggesting it as a condition.
I'd be happier as a condition.
Well, I don't think that's not something I would support. So
either way, I want my residents protected.
I understand what you're saying, and I'm suggesting a way forward,
been seconded,
which works. Okay, so in consultation with the chair, if and when a new construction management plan or a new application comes in to change how they're going to phase this development, the officers would come to me, and I would bear in mind what you've said today, Councillor Young.
Can that be recorded in the minutes?
Chair, can I wade in here, if that's all right? It's Tawhid Islam as the legal advisor. I'd say that an informative for the purpose of any phasing plan would be sufficient in this case. The condition would be far too stringent.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. An informative, and normally officers would consult with the chair when these sort of issues come up. So that's
Yeah.
probably the best way forward. Yeah. So the
Finding
committee
it's
agree to
recorded
that?
in the minutes, so we've got a record of it.
Yeah, it's going into the minutes. Obviously, this is also recorded, so it's there. Okay, we're going to move to the debate now. Anybody want to say anything about this application? Please raise your hand. Councillor Ball. Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I asked at the beginning regarding the effect of the neighbourhood plan policy, and the answer's made clear that it's up to us to determine whether the development on this site is, quote, not intrusive, dominant or overbearing when viewed from neighbouring residential buildings or from locations within and beyond the town centre. It does seem to me, Chair, that it would be dominant or overbearing. Also, Historic England, their comment on the effect of the development on the Grade 2 star listed Christ the Saviour Church, the Grade 2 listed Ealing Town Hall, and the Grade 1 listed Pittshanger Manor and its settings in Walpole Park, about which they say the proposed tall building imposes a central London scale of development and highly directly on the axis of the design, which we designated view, and it is at odds with the predominantly semi-rural character of this part of the conservation area. This harm could again be mitigated through a reduction in height of the proposed tall building. And I have to agree with Historic England that this scheme needs to be lower to mitigate the harm. We've also heard about the harm on residents of Astley House, and many of those flats for older people will suffer very significant loss of light if this goes ahead. We've also got the complete lack of pepper potting, which is very unfortunate on a council scheme. And finally, as this is a scheme on council land, there's an argument that the residential provided should be 100% affordable, but I mean, perhaps that's over the top, but at the very least, I think we should ensure that it is 50% affordable by unit as well as by habitable room, and that the mix of larger units and 10 years more closely meets the housing needs of Ealing people. That there is a very narrow window with some of these 10 years between people who can afford enough, who earn enough to afford them, or are considered to be earning so much that they're not eligible for those products. So there's really quite a narrow window of people that are being helped by these. So overall, as I say, primarily on the points that I mentioned earliest about the effect on the listed buildings, Chair, I'll be voting to refuse this application.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Ball. But I would point out to you, Councillor Ball, you can't make one condition. Habitable room is what we use for most applications in terms of affordable housing and a percentage. I'm not sure that you should try and change it just for one application. Units are not the measure, it's habitable room. And that's what we do for all applications. So I think you shouldn't play a game where you change the unit of measurement. Are you happy that that is what our official policy is? We measure affordable housing by habitable room and not by units.
I mean, in many applications, we always get the figures quoted by habitable room and by unit.
Yes,
and in
we
many
do, but
applications,
habitable room is
they
the
meet
one.
the criteria on both.
Yeah, no, but criteria is on habitable room, as you know very well, and don't try and change it halfway through.
Well, no, I'm not trying to change. I'm saying ideally it should have both. I'm not saying that one criteria is worthless and the other one's the only one to go for, but I'm saying it should have both.
Okay, I've got Councillor Conlon, then Councillor Donnelly, and then Councillor Rice. Councillor Conlon.
Okay, thank you, Chair. First of all, can I just say a bit about this issue of the pepper potting and the segregation of the affordable housing and the market housing? We have kind of discussed this, again tonight, and we've discussed it at the previous meetings. But why I think this is important is that because although I accept, that the different blocks are all being built to the same sort of standard, that the market and the affordable housing is at comparable space standards, and it's built to an equivalent quality and level of finish and all of that. The problem potentially can arise after people have moved in, and those blocks and the communal areas of those blocks have to be maintained and, every now and then redecorated and so on. And it is a question of whether the affordable blocks will get the same level of attention and the same level of resources and the same amount spent on them as the market blocks. Now, maybe they will, or maybe they won't, but the danger is that they won't. And then after a few years, the differences will become apparent, that the market blocks will be looking shiny and well maintained, and the affordable blocks will be looking increasingly sort of drab and neglected. Now, if the tenures are mixed within the blocks, you don't get that sort of problem because the communal areas are shared, so they all have to be maintained to the same standard. So I know that, segregation is the way that, social housing has always generally been built in the UK. We've had council estates completely separate from private estates. We've had council blocks completely separate to private blocks. And, social landlords find it difficult to get away from this style of thinking. But it is much better if they can change their way of thinking and can accept this idea that different types of tenures should be mixed. And I think as a council, we should be pushing the envelope here and going for, mixed tenures. And it's disappointing in this case, once again, that we're not. And I really do think that whatever we do with this development tonight, in future, we should look at this much more seriously and should come up with, I think, a better policy that does, end this sort of traditional segregation. The other issues that I have with this development are simply, the ones arising from the height of the tower. I just think that it is really too high for a tower in this particular location. And as a result, there is, as has been identified in the report, there is significant harm to the setting of heritage assets. And there is also harm to the neighbouring properties in terms of the loss of light and of their sort of views and this sort of thing. And there's particularly significant harm to the residents in Apsley House. So I think there's nothing, wrong with this development that can't actually, be fixed at not too much cost. But, we've got no ability in the committee tonight to amend the design or to even suggest amendments. We've just got to look at the development as it is. And as it is, I think, though there are, benefits of this block, which have been, discussed and are explained in this proposal, and those benefits have been explained at length in the report. The disbenefits, on balance, in my opinion, outweigh them. And so I'm against the development in its current form. And that's it from me for this evening.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Steve Domney.
Thank you, Chair. I think I'm often accused of repeating myself with justification, but it's not often that I find myself trying to recall, because I think out of fairness, I should recall the points I made the previous time this was discussed, and perhaps reflect on things that have been said tonight which weren't said last time, and indicate whether and why I've come to stay with the view I had previously. I think where I started last time was by trying to deal with the issue that caused us to have a deferral in February, which was about the number of 3-bedroom, larger family apartments. And I think, said then, and I'm sure now, I mean, ultimately, I think it's proved to have been a diversion, because I don't think really this is the nub of the decision making around this development. Because if one presses these points, ultimately, simultaneously, it's being argued by critics of the scheme, including tonight, that there isn't enough child play space and there aren't enough children. Well, I mean, if we resolve the second, we only make the first worse. And I think ultimately that's not where this development stands or falls. I've got a lot of sympathy with some of the points that Councillor Connell was making, particularly around the pepper potting. I mean, I think we have to take seriously points that are made to us about the significantly greater ease of management for social housing providers in being able to identify a defined space as theirs to manage, rather than in having to deal with a small amount of a larger number of buildings. I'm not sure I accept all his points about the report indicating significant harm. I think he's taken aspects of the report and converted them to his conclusion that it represents significant harm. I'm not sure the reports indicate significant harm to that degree. The spectre of social housing, different forms of social housing, different forms of affordable housing has come up, where discount market rent in particular. We heard, I think, that other boroughs, another borough in London, doesn't allow discount market rent. This surprised me. I can say that a quick review shows me that it, as part of Southwark's plan for that's currently under review, there's frequent references to discount market rate rents and the circumstances in which it allows them. It certainly pushes hard for significant discounts. The point about discount market rent is it doesn't always mean 80%, but I don't think any London borough could sustain a policy in which it sought to prevent discount market rent being proposed or indeed implemented in any development within its boundaries. So ultimately, we come to the sort of points that we discussed around another development, seemingly very recently, which are about the scale, the height, the massing, the appropriateness. And I said at that previous meeting, and I say again now, that I do not have an issue with the height of buildings per se. To me, it is about context. I don't have an issue with massing. It's about context. And the context of this proposal is, for me, very different to the context of the proposal of which I was one of those who opposed 2 or 3 weeks ago. The point that was made earlier about the design review panel is an interesting one. It's rightly suggested from time to time that we don't make enough use of design review panels. We don't take enough account of the aesthetics, the best practice, what the industry can bring. Well, we've had input from design review panels here who have been effusive in their praise of the development on the whole. And what it's shown, of course, is, then it breaks down to a matter of opinion that, understandably, not everybody is going to agree with the design review panel. But from the point of view of the proposal that's before us and the consultation on it, I think we can't say that no attempt's been made to make this proposal quality, and repeatedly within the design review panel feedback, references made to the very high quality that is both needed and provided in the context of a development on this site. It is a townscape rather than merely a few flats being thrown up. And in that context, it needs to show that it's been done well. From my point of view, I believe it has been done well enough. I can find no reasonable material planning grounds to refuse this application, and I shall be voting in favour of it, I believe.
Thank you very much, Councillor. So then I have Councillor Rice.
Thank you, Chair. I must say that looking at this development, it just makes me think of all the families I know who just live in very poor accommodation and who would really very much desire to live in far better accommodation. And I think that this development is the kind of thing that we need in order to meet those needs of people in Ealing who are suffering in poor accommodation. So I'm very supportive of what's been provided there when I think about everything on balance. And one thing I have had a chance to think a lot about is what previous questions that I've raised about the shop units that are there. And I do understand that we're working very hard at the council with our high streets task force, and we're really looking at our high streets and improving them. And I think we are thinking out of the box and coming up with ideas about how to use units. And so I am excited to think about how we could use the units that are there in order to promote the community, maybe have galleries and really do services for the community and to do something very exciting. So I am actually I think on balance, I think that this is a very good development and I will be voting in favour. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have Councillor Young.
Thank you, Chair. When I saw the email with the mock-up showing the height of the new building to be equivalent to the Statue of Liberty, my thought was that Ealing should be the queen of the suburbs, not a suburb of the borough of Queens in New York. This development is too high, this development is too dense, and this development is poorly designed. We've already heard this evening about the substandard cycle storage, the massive lack of play space, which isn't going to be replaced by spending a few pounds here and there on Haven Green, Walpole Park, and believe it or not, Dean Gardens and Lammas Park, a long way away from the development. We've heard how family accommodation may go up as high as the 7th floor in the development. Anybody who's ever had a young family will know that isn't very practical at all. We haven't really talked about the impact on Longfield Avenue. It's already quite a gloomy place, but if you narrow it still further with this development, it will be even more gloomy. This development is going to impact on the street trees. We're going to have to cut away about half of one side of the crowns of the street trees on Longfield Avenue to accommodate it. The loss of light to the residents of Apsley House, the major impact on 126 windows. Living conditions of the people in Apsley House are going to deteriorate quite markedly. I don't think this is acceptable. To say that they are lucky because they have the light over the car park at the moment doesn't give us a reason to take that light away from them. We've heard about the 33 shortfall in spaces for disabled parking. Again, another sign of bad design in this development. We've heard about the poor doors, the lack of pepper potting. Again, poor design. And the whole building is going to be 25 foot further forwards on Uxbridge Road. Think of the impact that's going to impose on the next door town hall. This is a poorly designed development. We should be voting against it. We can do far better.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Anand.
Thank you, Chair. We've spent sorry, I was getting double feedback there. We spent 10 hours, more than 10 hours in deliberating in this debate.
No, we haven't, Councillor Anand. This is the debate.
Okay, sorry.
Any previous debate is not relevant. Please bear that in mind. As I said.
No, that's quite understandable. Sorry. Yes. Hello.
Yes.
Can you hear me? Hello.
Hello, Councillor Anand?
Yes, sorry, the signal was very poor. No, I totally understand, Chair, but what I'm saying is that I was present in the first meeting on the 17th of February, and this current meeting, we spent a lot of time in actually going over lots of points. And in the first meeting, it was there was a deferral made, and the 3-bedroom houses were increased by 21, and that was very welcoming, although not disappointing, because it was a token gesture in the housing mix, and we would have favoured much more. Well, I would have favoured much more. And then it begs the question, this development. It's been thought that people don't want to stay in 3-bedroom flats in a tower riser, but if you ask the question, and I've thought about this, do families want to get out of overcrowded accommodation and move into a larger accommodation? My answer, in my view, was yes. Does this development give us a new library? The answer is yes. Do we get viable offices, dynamic state-of-the-art offices, sustainability? Yes, the answer is yes. We've got lots of benefits from this development. We're getting a lot of who are waiting on the housing list and want this development to go through. They'll get out of the poor housing that they're in at the moment. But then we actually come to the other points. We are getting a very good library, we're getting new offices, we're getting much needed housing, but then there's no pepper potting. As a local authority, we are expected also to provide parking. And why I say parking is that this is the only place in Ealing that has street level parking. We don't have any other, we do have multi-level parking, but a lot of elderly residents aren't very happy in getting up these hills in the slopes in the multi-level parkings. So we do actually need to consider that this is a used land. However, it's not a very useful land to have a car park, but it's still having some good useful land during the weekends when the residents can park there. Visitors are parking there, workers are using it, local businesses need the space as well, but it's not an exactly fantastic use of the land. So we are building these houses. However, Ealing has been considered the queen of the suburbs. This will change Ealing's landmark forever. And we are councillors and also the planning committee members. We are custodians of Ealing, and we've inherited something which we need to maintain. And although this may not be a planning matter, but it is heritage issues here that we can consider as planning. It's also the height. It's not fitting in with the height. As it's known, it's over dense. It's somewhat shadowing. To sum up, I am not satisfied that I can support this development tonight.
Thank you very much, Councillor Anand. Thank you very much. Councillor Blacker.
Thanks, Chair. Look, before I get into some of it, I just think we need to step back a second. And as elected representatives, remember we have a responsibility to those who are watching, to our constituents, to be honest about planning. Planning is a, we always use the quasi-judicial phrase. We are bound and governed by rules and frameworks and plans, and we can't deviate from those without proper grounds. We also need to be clear with people about what is proposed. And I've seen people objecting on the basis that this is 80% market rent, which is not true. It's simply not true that it is 80% discount market rent in the DMI units, and the table that officers showed was very helpful. We have a responsibility not to use the lives of more than 70 people who died at Grenfell as emotional blackmail in planning matters, because it's it's exactly that. It's emotional blackmail and not a planning ground. And I think it is disrespectful to those to use it in such a political way. We also need to suggest to those watching that we have read the papers for these meetings. And I think asking questions that are so easily, clearly answered in the paperwork before us that we've had several chances to read now, is a waste of not just the committee's time, but the public's time, because it suggests that we haven't bothered preparing. And I think, all members of this committee, if they're not prepared, should actually just recuse themselves and say they're not ready to make a decision based on the information that they've managed to read. We are paid to be councillors, we have an allowance, and I think people have a responsibility to use that money respectfully, because it is taxpayers' money that is paying us to do this. And if we're not bothering to read the papers and have to ask questions about what is contained within the paperwork, we should recuse ourselves and perhaps consider whether we are suitable to be here. We also have to be clear that this is not the same kind of application that we saw a few weeks ago at Gunnell. And the key point there is that Gunnell was on metropolitan open land. And the presumption with metropolitan open land is against development, that it must be protected. This is not MOL, and we are therefore bound by the National Planning Policy Framework that presumes development, sustainable development. Although, of course, in the government's definition, sustainable development is one that, creates massive profit for private developers. So we are bound by that. And I think that the report is very helpfully lays out our considerations under the NPPF in this regard, and specifically policies that relate to the kind of site that we are talking about. In the centre of Ealing, a stone's throw from a Crossrail station, bus stops to the left and right at the end of Longfield Avenue, and where, of course, as a borough, we have a significant shortage of housing. And it's on 77 and 78 of the report, paragraph 123 of the NPPF. Plans should contain policies to optimise the use of land, meet as much of the identified need as possible, it should be less robustly. We have to be flexible approach in applying policies or guidance relating to daylight and sunlight for these kinds of sites. And we have to maximise the use for housing. And this is not a housing-led development at all. This is a civic-led development. It is a new civic office for Ealing, a new central library for Ealing, getting it out of the second floor of the Broadway Centre, hidden away where, frankly, I've never been able to find it, and put it on the front of the Uxbridge Road and say, this is Ealing's library for everyone to use. But we also get the housing. We also get 50% affordable housing. And the housing mix, is not to everyone's taste, but it is within the policies we have. And as I said, we are bound by policies that say we have to presume in favour unless there are good reasons otherwise. Councillors Conlon and others have given us good reasons to refuse it. They've said they don't like the effect on Aspley House. They don't like the tall buildings. And it is for us to suggest, us to consider whether those are on balance enough to presume against. But I don't think on balance they are, in fact. And I think, in fact, on the Aspley House, I think the video shown by Mr. Colvin was annoyingly detrimental to his cause when I saw it, because I saw the shadow of the 26-storey tower moving around, and yes, there were impacts to the north as the sun moved around. And actually, as the shadows lengthened, it was mostly down. The shadow of the 26-storey tower was mostly down the railway line. And actually, it was not the 26-storey tower that's having the impact on Aspley House. And it is the 26-storey tower that is actually the most incongruous aspect of this development. So I don't think that because of the light of the 26-storey tower, we can reject it. And on the tall buildings, we've heard this evening that tall buildings are bad for people. And they're not bad for people, because otherwise people wouldn't pay a fortune to live in the Trellick Tower. What was bad for people in tower blocks was the poverty they were living in. It is not, there are issues around the design of estates, yes, and those contribute to issues. But the fundamental problem for people in tower blocks was the poverty, because they tended to be council blocks, they tended to be on low incomes. And the solution to that is not to say no more tower blocks, it's to say we will give people affordable housing and make them pay less of their income on housing and support them in employment. and we are putting 50% affordable housing in here, which is a good thing. So I think, a lot of the things we've heard this evening have been good points. On the heritage aspects, I would have to agree with Councillor Donnelly on that. There are harms, but they are less than substantial. It would have been nice. There would have been even less harm had the tower block come down. It didn't. There is still less than substantial harm, and we can't refuse it on that ground. So because we are bound by these rules that say we have to presume in favour of development, and because there's just not enough to say that the balance tips against, I will have to vote in favour, Chair.
Thank you. I have Councillor Woodruff and then Councillor Wall, Lauren Wall, sorry. Councillor Woodruff?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Have you got me? Is that right?
Yes. Yep, we have.
Well, I've been listening to the debate a lot. I don't think it's any secret. I do have certain reservations about this particular development, largely over the pepper potting and Apsley House. I think the effect on Apsley House. I sort of kind of live in hope that the developer, which is the council, might come back with some amendments later on to improve those. I mean, town centres develop. I mean, you look right. You go walk down Ealing Broadway, and they're buildings from completely different architectural styles. Ealing isn't a place where there's one architectural style. That's not, and it develops, and that in order to thrive, it needs to develop. We've got a development here with a lot of new affordable house, 50% affordable housing, whereas I think a lot of good points have been made, and I have sympathy for a lot of the criticisms about it. I feel that overall I think the developments we're supporting, so I shall be voting in favour of it with some reservations, but they're not reservations that would be enough to actually overturn the planning application. I think we do look at planning application rules, and to be honest, I think they conform with the planning application. So I'll be voting.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Wall?
Thank you, Chair. I would just like to say on the affordable housing, I think it's a really good scheme that we're getting the affordable housing on site, but particularly in this kind of a site in the centre of the borough, a really primary location, very valuable site, if you like. But it's great that we're getting it on site, and it's also good that the intermediate product, if you like, is kind of equivalent to the London living rent and offering discounts of up to 50% off. So that's better than we see in many other schemes. Plus, we're getting the London affordable rent, 70 units at that. So, I do think we have to be mindful that we are going to be giving 226 families the chance to live in such a location that they wouldn't be able to afford otherwise. And it's unusual that we're able to do that. It's a great location. As Councillor Blacker mentioned, it's going to be on the Crossrail link. It's already benefits from brilliant transport facilities. So many families would just absolutely love to live in that location. And I don't think that we should deny them the chance to do that. There's been a lot of misinformation being circulated. We heard tonight things about the Apsley House residents saying that they're going to suffer disastrous loss of daylight, or they're going to be blocking out every bit of daylight and sunlight. We've heard from the officers that that's just not accurate. And the distance between Block 6 and Apsley House meets the minimum required space for an urban development. And it's kind of similar to the distance between Block 5 and Block 6, Block 6 being the private block. So presumably the residents who buy those flats will be all right with that sort of distance and loss of daylight, sunlight. It's quite normal in an urban environment. And obviously the Apsley House residents will suffer, but we've heard that suffering it's got to be treated relatively, because there's an empty car park basically there at the moment, and if the council wants to optimize the site, which it has a duty to do, it's going to be building something there. So they're going to get something, whatever scheme comes along in the future as well. It's not going to stay as it is, more than likely. So we've heard that the heritage issues, they're there. You will see the big story block, but we've heard from the Heritage England and other experts that the harm is less substantial. And probably the last point I'd like to make is that we've had lots of emails from people saying that there's so many objections and that we should listen and we should do what they tell us to do. I would just like to sort of say that it doesn't work like that on planning. It doesn't matter how many people object. It's the quality of the objections and the planning considerations that we take into account. So we will listen to the objections, we will take them into account, but we won't be told what to do by the objectors. We'll take in the whole round of things, and we will consider those objections, but we will also consider the need in Ealing. And we've heard David Baptiste tell us, or demonstrate to us, that this scheme meets need now for affordable housing. And we'll take everything into the round. So on balance, I want to give the chance to 226 families to come and live in central Ealing, where I know they'd love to live. And I'll be voting in favour of this scheme.
Thank you very much, Councillor. I have Councillor Ray Wall. Please indicate if you want to speak, because then I'll move to summing up.
Can you hear me, Chair?
Yes, I can.
I'll be brief, because most of the things I was going to say have been said, but I just want to pick up on the misnomer that if you throw thousands of objections at this, that is going to overturn what we think in the committee.
You've got two, I think there's two lots on. You need to switch the other one off, otherwise you're echoing.
Really?
Yep, that's better, sorry.
Okay, right. So just going back. So
Councillor Wall still there.
Yeah, you need to turn the other loudspeaker off, Ray.
Take it out there. Can you hear me now? Is it the same?
Just speak a little bit more, let's see.
Can you hear me now, Chair? Is it still echoing? Well, there's no other device in this room.
Okay, that's fine then, carry on.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Is that better?
Yep.
Very clear, very clear.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll be very brief. Sorry, I'll probably be briefer than the gap that we've just had. So, number of objections is not really to be taken into account. Yes, we hear them. Yes, we look at them. Yes, we read them. Yes, we take them into account when we're doing this. But what we also take into account is all the other people that live in this borough, and all the people who are homeless, who are future residents in Ealing, and those that are sofa surfing or whatever you want to call it, and those in generation rent. We need to deal with all those people on the housing list. So, you know, they're not the ones that will object to these sort of things. But having taken that, I would say that on balance, and I won't go through the list because I went through the list last time, in terms of benefits and disbenefits, I think the benefits of this scheme with the 50% affordable homes and split 70, 156 is a good scheme. Plus, we're getting a brand new fit for the 21st century library and civic space. That is maybe we could shrink that civic space going forward because it is flexible, as the officer said earlier. So they're the things that I will be voting on this evening, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mahmood, last person indicated.
Thank you, Chair. It's already, lots have been already said, but I would like to reiterate what has been said in terms of 50% affordable housing, 266 family new future Ealing residents, and brand new library and brand new Ealing Council. I would be happy to support, and I presume is a harm less than substantial. So I would be minded to support that application, Chair, tonight.
Okay, thank you very much. I see no more indications, so I'm just I am going to sum up a little bit because I think it's really important. Today we've had a very, very informed debate and questions asked. So I'd like to thank the committee. This committee has looked at this application for, I think, the longest that I know of in Ealing's history in terms of the deferral, and then the unfortunate issue with the 10th of March meeting, and today. And today we're getting close to 3 hours again for this application. So it's had an absolute high level of, shall we say, debate and scrutiny around this matter. Chairing a planning committee is very difficult. I mean, I went through all the objections on our website, on our portal, and I spent quite a few hours going through it. And as other members have pointed out, it is important we listen to people's views and their views around what the issues are. But I would say very clearly, going through some of those reasons, there is so much misinformation going around the social media and on the reasons that we should not grant this application, that many people have been fed, I don't know where from, but they're raising issues which have no relevance to what is actually in the report. And the report clearly outlines all the main issues. So members of the committee have looked at them and they need to come up with a judgment as to which way they want to go. And I would point out this committee is independent from the local authority. That's one of the major criticisms that we've had. And that, as many members, a few of the members have pointed out, we had a very large application, again, with the council as an applicant with another developer earlier 2 weeks ago, where this committee, not all the members were on that committee, but the planning committee of Ealing, with me chairing, moved ahead and actually refused the application. That seems to get forgotten by all the objectors. They seem to claim that this committee does not look at matters independently, and that would prove the point that this committee does and is willing to be brave when they don't agree with the application that's in front of them. And they did turn down one of the largest applications in Ealing only 2 weeks ago. So now I think I want to thank the committee, and I'm going to move to the vote. So Katie, can I first of all find out, is everybody been part of this debate and questions? Nobody fell out, i.e. Technology made you fall out from this application? Can everybody confirm?
Chair, Councillor Anand, I did fall out, but I was concurrently having my phone running simultaneously. So that's hence I was getting the feedback when I was speaking. So I did fall out, but I was actually connected with my phone at the same time.
Okay, and we've put some informatives on about the construction management plan and also the disabled spaces. So that's on this report. And can I check with the DSO that everything is clear?
Yes, thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. So now I will move to a roll call vote. Councillor Stephen Donnelly, how do you vote?
I vote in favour of the application, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Praveen Anand. Councillor Anand, you're muted.
I abstain, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Ball.
I vote
You've got yours
against
and
the
I need to speak
application,
first.
Chair.
Okay. Councillor Blacker.
In favour, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Codlan.
Against, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Mahmood.
I'm in favour, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Rice.
In favour, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Sumner.
Against, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Wall.
In favour, Chair.
Councillor Ray Wall.
For, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Woodruff.
In favour.
And Councillor Young.
Against.
Okay, so I make that 1 abstention, 4 against, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and myself 8, 4. Is that right, Katie?
Thank you, Chair. So I note there's 1 abstention, which was Councillor Anand.
Yes.
In favour, I have 9 here.
Oh, have I got that, including me? 2, 3, 4, 6, 7. No, I make it 8. Oh, where did you get 9 from?
Okay, bear with me a second. Okay, in that case, please could I just get Councillor Ball to confirm what your vote was, please?
Councillor Ball was against.
Yeah, that's right. I was against. I think
Okay.
somebody cut in while I was talking, but I was against.
Yeah, okay, no, that's fine. So yes. So that's
4 against, 1 abstention, and 8, 4.
That's correct, Chair, yes.
Okay, so can I thank everybody, all the officers, all the people who've taken part, and can I thank members of the public who may be viewing this meeting. I'm sorry it's taken so long, but you can be assured that members of the committee take a lot of effort and time to actually go through the issues, and I hope you found it informative as to how a planning committee works. I think we're done today. Thank you very much. Can we close the live stream now, Katie?
So I will do, Chair, but if everyone could please just leave the meeting quietly, I will leave it running for just a few moments until we're informed by IT.
Okay, thank you. Can I thank the committee and everybody else? Thank you very much. And good night.
Thank you, Chair. Good night.
Good
Thanks,
night.
Chair.
Good night.
Thank you, Chair.
Good night.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, good night, folks.